Sometimes I'll engage and sometimes I'll catch myself.
Leaked footage from the 2025 Ryder Cup showed a side of Rory McIlroy the world rarely sees.
Shut the f*** up.
For years, McIlroy has been the face of modern golf. Calm under pressure, articulate in interviews, a world-class champion who carries himself with grace. He is everything the sport wants in a global ambassador, a man who understands that golf is built on respect and tradition. But on a chaotic Saturday afternoon at Bethpage Black, that carefully constructed image shattered. Cameras captured McIlroy's face twisted in raw, undisguised fury as he confronted a crowd that had pushed him too far. The moment went viral instantly. Millions watched as the composed professional they thought they knew completely lost his cool. But as the footage went viral, the world was left to wonder. Was this a justified reaction from a husband defending his family? Or the moment a global superstar finally cracked under the pressure and lost control? The breaking point came on Saturday afternoon. Team Europe was playing strong on American soil, and the New York crowd was getting more and more frustrated. Rory McIlroy had become their main target. Then it happened. A spectator threw a beer cup that landed near McIlroy's wife, Erica, as they walked through the gallery. Video from a new angle later showed up on social media, confirming that a player's spouse had been targeted. This was the final straw. The abuse had crossed from words to actions, and for McIlroy, there was no going back. His reaction was instant. The calm composure he had kept for days completely fell apart. Witnesses and video show pure shock on his face, which quickly turned to rage as he spun around to yell at the crowd. Security moved in fast. It was the image of a man who had been pushed past his breaking point, his professional mask stripped away to reveal a husband reacting to an attack on his wife. But here's where the story gets complicated. Yes, someone threw a cup at his wife. That was wrong. No question about it. But some critics argued that McIlroy overreacted. They said he should have kept his composure like a true professional. By shouting and confronting the crowd, they claimed he only made things worse. His fiery response gave the hostile fans exactly what they wanted. More drama, more chaos. Instead of rising above it, he fell right into their trap. And this was not the first time McIlroy had clashed with the crowd that weekend. The toxic atmosphere had been building from the very first tee on Friday morning. As McIlroy prepared to play, a group of the 3,500 fans in the grandstand started a vulgar chant. They screamed at him using profanity. Shockingly, the official master of ceremonies, comedian Heather McMahon, joined in. She actually barked the curse word into her microphone. She was later fired and apologized, but the damage was done. The message was clear to the rowdy crowd. There were no real rules here. This set a toxic precedent for the entire weekend. It makes you wonder where the line is for fan behavior in sports. Let us know in the comments what you think is acceptable, and while you are there, be sure to subscribe for more stories that go beyond the headlines. From that moment on, the abuse never stopped. It was not just generic crowd noise. These were personal, targeted attacks designed to get under his skin. McIlroy bore the worst of it. The constant heckling became so bad that on Saturday, he had to step away from a crucial shot on the 16th hole. He turned to the crowd and yelled at them to shut up. The verbal attacks cut deep. Hecklers mocked his height. They mocked his Northern Irish heritage. They even brought up his most painful professional failure, his missed putt that cost him the 2024 US Open at Pinehurst. Now, you might think a champion would be able to handle that. You might think someone who has competed at the highest level for over a decade would have thicker skin, but McIlroy could not seem to let it go. In fact, reports from Friday show that both McIlroy and his playing partner, Shane Lowry, were seen making offensive gestures toward the crowd in response to personal insults. So it was not just that the fans were out of control. McIlroy himself was contributing to the hostile atmosphere with his own reactions. The abuse went beyond just words. One fan was kicked out after McIlroy personally pointed him out to security for directing a hateful slur at him. Other European players were targeted too. Robert McIntyre had someone yell at him about his weight on the 17th tee. Shane Lowry faced so much vulgarity that at one point, his caddy had to physically hold him back from going after a heckler. But let us be clear about something. The environment at Bethpage was brutal. No one is denying that. The question is whether McIlroy handled it the right way. A true champion, some would argue, should be able to rise above the noise. They should be able to tune it out and let their performance on the course do the talking. Instead, McIlroy let the crowd get to him. He engaged with them, he shouted back, he made gestures, and when the beer cup finally flew, he exploded. Think about other great athletes who have faced hostile crowds. They stayed focused. They used the negativity as fuel. They turned the booze into motivation and let their performance silence the critics. But McIlroy chose a different path. He chose confrontation. He chose to fight back verbally and physically, and in doing so, he gave the crowd exactly what they wanted. More reactions, more drama, more content for their phones. The security response tells its own story. Extra personnel had to be called in. Reports mentioned more than a dozen state troopers eventually had to flank McIlroy's group on Sunday just to keep things under control. But But here's the question no one wants to ask. Would all that security have been necessary if McIlroy had not escalated things himself? If he had simply ignored the taunts and focused on his golf, would the situation have spiraled so badly? His teammate Shane Lowry described the abuse that Erica received as astonishing, and it was. But McIlroy's visible anger throughout the weekend may have actually encouraged more bad behavior, not less. When you show the hecklers they are getting to you, they only get louder. Was the cup the real reason for his outburst? Or was it just the excuse he needed to finally let out all the frustration that had been building? Some observers suggested that the personal insults, especially the ones about his past failures, had gotten deep under his skin. The pressure of competing at the highest level combined with a hostile crowd attacking not just his game but his character became too much. The cup was just the final trigger for a meltdown that was already coming. Look at the pattern that emerged over those 3 days. First, the vulgar chants on Friday morning. McIlroy's response? Offensive gestures toward the crowd. Then more heckling throughout the day. His response? More confrontation. By Saturday, things had reached a boiling point. He was stepping away from shots to yell at fans. He was pointing out hecklers to security. He was visibly agitated, his focus clearly broken. This was not the behavior of someone in control. This was someone spiraling, someone letting the external noise infiltrate his mental game. And here is what makes it even more questionable. McIlroy is not a rookie. He has played in multiple Ryder Cups. He has faced hostile American crowds before. He knows what to expect. He should have been prepared. He should have had the mental tools to handle it. But instead, he seemed to crumble under the weight of it all. The composed champion everyone thought they knew turned out to have a breaking point that was easier to reach than anyone imagined. And then the footage went viral. Within hours, unfiltered video from spectators' smartphones was all over Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. This was not polished broadcast footage. This was raw, chaotic, emotional content that told a story the official cameras never would. The world saw McIlroy at his angriest. They saw him lose control, and it sparked a massive debate. On one side, his defenders said he was justified. They argued that any person would react the same way if their spouse was targeted. They called him a hero for finally standing up to a toxic culture. On the other side, critics said that as a highly paid professional, McIlroy overreacted. They claimed his fiery response only served to fuel the crowd's antagonism. By engaging with the hecklers, he gave them power. He made himself look weak, not strong. The viral videos created a global conversation that the PGA of America could not control. The raw emotion in those clips shaped public opinion far more than any official statement ever could. And here is the thing. It was McIlroy's explosive confrontation, not just the fans' action, that created the global firestorm. Yes, someone threw a cup, but it was his reaction that made headlines around the world. It was his loss of composure that forced the PGA into a crisis management situation. The organization struggled to respond. At first, their statements were weak and vague. Even as the abuse reached a peak on Saturday, McIlroy himself told reporters that people could be their own judge of whether things went too far. He was trying not to make it worse, but his silence in the moment only created a leadership vacuum that was filled by public outrage. After the event ended, the PGA's response was a mess. CEO Derek Sprague issued a sincere apology. He admitted people had crossed the line and promised they would do better. He even reached out personally to the McIlroys, but President Don Rea completely undermined that message. He downplayed the incidents in interviews. He compared the insults to what you might hear at a youth soccer game. He claimed he had not even heard some of it. Later, he reversed course and admitted in a letter that fan behavior had crossed the line, but his initial reaction made him look tone-deaf and uncaring. The contradiction revealed a deeper problem. The Ryder Cup makes huge money in the United States by creating a loud, rowdy, alcohol-fueled atmosphere. That is the product they are selling. But the global brand of golf is supposed to be about respect and sportsmanship. The leadership was caught between protecting their profitable fan experience and protecting the integrity of the game. They failed at both. Into this mess stepped some of golf's most respected voices. Former U.S. Ryder Cup captain Tom Watson said he was ashamed of the American crowd's rude and mean-spirited behavior. His words, coming from a legend of the game, carried real weight. Even some American players spoke out. Justin Thomas admitted the abuse was unfortunate. He said the U.S. team had not given the crowd something to cheer for, so they turned to negativity instead. It was a subtle criticism of fans who chose insults over support, but the most powerful voice came from McIlroy himself. After Europe secured the victory and the trophy was won, he completely transformed. The furious competitor from Saturday became a composed spokesman in the press conference. He spoke without holding back. He said what happened that week was not acceptable. He said golf should be held to a higher standard. He reminded everyone that golf teaches etiquette, respect, and how to play by the rules. He said sometimes that week they did not see those values. McIlroy did the job the PGA leadership should have done. He drew a clear line between passion and abuse. He also took on the role of guardian for the Ryder Cup's future. He promised that when the event comes to Ireland in 2027, such behavior would not be tolerated. He made a smart point about the nature of the crowd's support. He said if he were an American, he would be annoyed. He pointed out that he heard a lot of shouts against him, but not many shouts for the American players. It was a call for fans to support their own team instead of just attacking the opposition. Weeks later, McIlroy said said he regretted that the fan behavior was overshadowing his team's incredible performance. He wished the event was not being remembered for the wrong reason. It was a sad reflection on what had been lost. His team had achieved something remarkable, but no one was talking about it. The ugliness in the crowd had stolen the spotlight. The 2025 Ryder Cup at Bethpage Black will be remembered as a moment of shame. Global media described it as repulsive, embarrassing, and a grotesque display of abuse. The prestigious brand of the Ryder Cup was badly damaged. The image of a fierce but honorable rivalry was shattered by a mob-like atmosphere. The legacy of Bethpage is a wake-up call. Experts have called for a shift from reacting to bad behavior after it happens to preventing it in the first place. They want a zero-tolerance policy, but that would require more than just extra security. It would need a complete cultural reset. Organizers, sponsors, and broadcasters would have to decide if short-term revenue from a hyper-partisan, drunken crowd is worth the long-term damage to the sport. But here is the final twist. Despite the chaos, despite the criticism, despite his own shocking loss of composure, Rory McIlroy became the most articulate defender of the game's values. After exploding at the crowd in a moment of fury, he stepped up when it mattered most. He used his platform to speak truth. He reminded the world what golf is supposed to stand for. He became a statesman when the sport desperately needed one. The Bethpage incident held up a mirror to something bigger than golf. It showed the broader decline of civility in public life. It showed what happens when passion loses its conscience. In an era of intense tribalism, the Ryder Cup became a cautionary tale. The celebration of a historic victory was completely overshadowed by ugliness. Whether the lessons are learned, whether the courage exists to reclaim sportsmanship over spectacle will determine the soul of the Ryder Cup for years to come. And it will define whether moments like McIlroy's viral outburst become the norm or remain the exception. That is the real question we should all be asking.